rising up from this muck, was the idea of individual freedom and the institutions of individual freedom. Personal freedom, religious freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, free market.
He had a really comprehensive knowledge, not just of economics, but of political theory, philosophy, and many other subjects. And he had a tremendous intellectual curiosity about all things. He was constantly coming up with new ideas, and he was very enthusiastic about the new ideas he found.
First is the non-aggression principle, NAP. Keep your mitts to yourself and don't grab other people or their property without their permission. Now, in boxing, if you and I are in a boxing match and you punch me in the nose, I can't say, oh, assault and battery, because I've agreed to be hit above the belt. The second one would be private property rights. And we need private property rights because suppose you grab this shirt that I'm now wearing. Did you violate the non-aggression principle? Well, it all depends upon who owns this shirt. If I stole it from you yesterday, you're just repossessing your property, and I'm the bad guy. On the other hand, it's my shirt, keep your mitts off, and if you grab it, you're the bad guy. So we have to know who is the owner of my shirt. And the third one is free association. No one should be forced or compelled to associate with anyone against his will. One of the direct effects of the non-aggression principle, the NAP, is no government. That would be the purest libertarian view. Why? Because government taxes people against their will. And we just got finished saying that the non-aggression principle says that you shouldn't be forced to do anything. You should be able to do anything you damn well please, except keep your mitts off of other people. Well, when they're taxing us, that violates the non-aggression principle and it violates free association. They're making us associate with them. And where do we get that from? I didn't sign the Constitution.
The idea that rights are simple and clear and therefore you can eliminate everything by, you can solve all problems by showing you can't do that because it violates rights. And some of those, I guess my favorite counter to that, which comes from Bill Bradford, who was the editor of Liberty magazine. He's no longer alive, unfortunately, but he was an interesting guy. And he says, all right, this is my memory of his example. You happen to be you fall off your balcony on the 15th floor of an apartment building, unfortunately. But fortunately, there's a flagpole coming off the balcony on the 14th floor, just below you, and you manage to grab hold of that. It doesn't break, and you're going hand over hand back to the 14th floor balcony to get on it and get down. When the owner of that apartment comes onto his balcony and he says, that flagpole is my property, not yours, let go. Do you? Well, if the answer is that you don't, we have to either say that's because you're a bad person, you've just violated his rights, or you have to say it is morally legitimate to violate rights when enough is at stake, which is basically what this comes to. But once you've conceded that it's morally right to violate rights when enough is at stake, now you've abandoned the moral argument against almost everything.
I know lots of people have different visions of what this looks like. But let's say we're talking about an extremely decentralized covenant community where people just come together and form communities where they sign a contract and I agree to live in this place and follow these rules. And as I argue in some of my essays, this is probably the likely way that most people would live. A lot of people imagine that, oh, well, I'll just go out and do my own thing out in the countryside and no one will bother me. This is, of course, an extremely naive way of looking at things, is that your neighbors would probably just come and try and take your stuff away. So most people would congregate into a group of some kind and then agree to give up certain prerogatives in order to amass their resources and put together a private security force and so on.
I think when it comes to the most widely understood cases of unjustified aggression, there is a pretty broad range of agreement. I mean, yeah, not everybody thinks taxation is theft, but virtually everybody thinks murder can't be justified. Virtually everybody thinks you can't break into somebody's house and take his things. And that's the baseline we operate from. And if there are a handful of people who don't accept that, well, that's what we have self-defense for.
I think it's just a numbers game. Like, it's just how many people believe in the moral legitimacy of the ruling class. Because people say, well, how do we end this? How do we end that? And, there are people using cryptos to undermine the extortion racket, which is awesome. There are people who are big on Second Amendment rights and we need guns, so we have the right to, so we have the ability to forcibly defend if they do this, which I'm fine with that too. But to me, it's a numbers game. Like, if there's only a few of us, we're doomed. You can run off and hide in a cabin in the woods or something, and you might get away with that. But I want to see the whole world become free and rational and moral.
Agorism is the school of anarchist thought developed by Samuel Edward Konkin III. Konkin advocated for peaceful counter-economics with the intent to starve the state of funding.
Sam and Neil were driving across country, actually. They were at college in New York, and they were driving across country, and they worked out the details of agorism. And Neil put it into his book, Alongside Night. If I recall correctly, Sam was supposed to have a book come out, but he couldn't find the publisher. So Neil, who he's friends with Heinlein and a lot of different authors, he was a little bit more established in the writing scene. He put out Alongside Night, and that was really the foundational text of agorism.
The main thing is just pretty much bleeding the state dry, staying out of the state in is any way possible, like not paying taxes, cash transactions and all that, but with the idea of doing it to stay away from government.
The white market, which is obviously the acceptable market, everybody trades in that, taxes, regulations. Then there's the gray markets, which is, it's a legal business, but you're not paying taxes, you're a tax evader or whatever, and you're not claiming everything, or it's not regulated.
Karl Hess was one of the early agorists. He used to be Republican. He worked for Barry Goldwater, and he coined the term, or the phrase, extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. And eventually he became more and more of an anarchist, and he got in with Sam Konkin and all those guys, and he wrote Community Technology, which is I hesitate to call it a book because it's so small, it's really just a booklet, where he describes his whole experience in the Adams Morgan neighborhood in Washington, D.C., where he creates this whole farm in an urban environment. And what's really striking to me is that if you can do that in Washington, D.C., you can do that anywhere.
Nobody is capable by revolutionary action of overturning great social systems. It has never been done. There hasn't been a revolution by armed force ever in the history of the world. What we have had is changes of management very often, but no revolution.
Crypto-anarchy. So the idea is essentially that the use of cryptography will help us subvert or undermine the state. And I think that's absolutely huge to where we are in the future. Not just in terms of blockchains, but also, like we said, in terms of Tor as well. So when we combine the two, again, we have things like the Silk Road, where you can buy and sell at will whatever you want to whomever you want without any form of regulation or censorship by Congress or your governor or your state legislature. Crypto-anarchy is, that is to me what's going to save us. And I think the crypto-anarchists have become essentially a wing of the agorist movement.
Anarchy is just normal life that happens all around us every day. When we walk down the street, we all have a vested interest in just having a society where we deal with one another peaceably and we deal with one another in ways that we feel are justified and win-win. I mean, anarchy is just in the air around us. It's not something abstract. It's just human beings doing what they want to do voluntarily, without force, without coercion.
We can distinguish between individualist anarchism, which is based on private property ownership, and other types of anarchism that are more of a communitarian kind that don't recognize private property.
I think that